Hey guys, this is Caleb with DSLR Video Shooter, and today I'm talking about 3 moves Sony could make to beat Panasonic in the small video camera world. These days, the number one question I get asked is, should I go with X Sony camera or X Panasonic camera? These are 2 huge players right now in the small mirrorless video world, and even up in the cinema world. And it's somewhat difficult to recommend one or the other, but if Sony made these 3 moves, it would be very difficult to recommend Panasonic. So let's start with number 1, and that would be what Sony does with the successor to the A6500. My guess is it's going to be the A6700, and one thing they could do to really make people lean toward this camera over the G85, which is what I'm filming with, is to add a flip out screen. Literally, if the only thing they did was add a flip out screen, I think flocks of people would switch over. I love this camera. There's so much going on that I really dig. The only thing is, anytime you're over here with the camera facing you, it's impossible to use. There's no flip out screen. You can use their app with your phone, but it's incredibly laggy and it locks out a lot of settings. And you could also use a monitor, but if you shoot in 4K, you can't see your settings on the monitor. So the only reason I recommend this over the G85, or one of the biggest reasons, is if you film like this. You're behind the camera, you're golden. But anytime you want to vlog, or if you're a YouTuber, it is very difficult to use. So literally, if all they did was give us a normal flip out screen, I would be crazy excited and promote the heck out of this camera because it's such a great camera. But in the meantime, for a little less, you can pick up the G85, which is what you're watching right now. Great camera, best kind of all-arounder with that flip out screen and several other great features. So that's the first big move Sony could make, would be making this camera totally beat out its competitor, which is the G85. Moving up a little bit to something like the A7S and the GH5, a way Sony could move a lot of people from this camera over to their A7 or whatever their next series is going to be. My guess is it'll be an A7S III, or it'll be something like an A9R or A9S, whatever it's going to be. It doesn't really matter. But if they, in that next camera, give us 10-bit and 422 internal recording, I think that would be enough to keep people from moving to the GH5. And the reason they only need to do a couple things is because of that full frame sensor. That is a huge pull toward those cameras. But right now, the GH5 is kind of king for internal specs, for what you can record on the card. So with that beefier A9 style body, Sony should be able to give us a little more internal processing power. The problem is with smaller cameras, you can't really do that. There's just too much heat and not enough room. And with those big sensors in there too, it becomes a problem. But if you beef up the body a little bit, they should be able to get us closer to that. And that would really keep people from picking up the GH5. If you could have 10-bit and some of the good stuff about the GH5 in a full frame Sony camera, that would be incredible. So that's the second move Sony could make, is make a camera that gives us what we want out of the GH5, but on a full frame sensor. And the third one is kind of a bonus round. I would love to see Sony kind of bring back that 5N, 6N camera style. I had an NEX 5N and really loved it. It's essentially a tiny or smaller version of the A6500, but not much smaller. And if they gave us one of those with a flip out screen, and literally the only great thing it did was 4K, I think that would move people from getting stuff like the G7 from Panasonic, which right now is pretty much the best budget 4K camera. And people would be going for that. So you wouldn't have to give us a ton of video specs, but if you gave us a 4K small camera like that, 5N from back in the day, that would really, really hurt Panasonic on their low end. And if you could price it, $600, $700, $800, that would really move people over. So those are 3 things I think Sony could do to completely kill off people from moving over to Micro Four Thirds and keep them from buying Panasonic cameras. Now, I love Panasonic a lot. What they're doing right now is some great, great stuff. But I also love Sony, and all these things that I've talked about, if Sony did those, would make my job a lot more difficult because I'd have to help people figure out which camera to go with. But if Sony really wanted to up their game, those are just a couple little things that would make a big difference. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this in the comments, which camera system you've gone with and why, and what you think Sony could do to kind of trump Panasonic and what Panasonic's doing, and other things that you'd like to see in future cameras. I'd love to hear that in the comments. Otherwise, fresh videos here every single week at DSLR Video Shooter. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.